Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. There is no single person that's associated with the Cleveland Browns that has had their probability of staying for next year ping pong more than Kevin Stefanski, right? We started the year thinking that Kevin would not get fired pretty much no matter what that happened, based on everything that the Browns said coming out of the owners meeting. And the reason people believed that was because of what Jimmy was saying, not just behind the scenes, but to the media himself. He was saying that Kevin was safe. He was saying that he sees the Watson thing as a swing and a miss, and therefore this as a completely new thing. Like, it felt like what was happening with Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry was that they were given new windows, as if they were new coaches after the Watson failure, after they all agreed that this Watson thing is a failure and we need to move on. They're going to get a new 2 to 3 year window to fix the Watson stuff. That's what it felt like, right? That's what it felt like everything was pointing to, everybody was saying. It feels even more like that because Kevin's able to fire Ken Dorsey and bring in his guy and Tommy Rees. And Tommy Rees is in the press conference talking about how Kevin is a big attractor to him to take this job and how he came here to learn under Kevin Stefanski. So this doesn't seem like a situation with Ken Dorsey where styles were clashing. This felt like Kevin kind of getting a new understudy almost to kind of fill in the role that Alex Van Pelt had filled while he was here. The whole offseason felt like a double down on the belief of Kevin Stefanski, right? How they believe in the Stefanski system, how the people in the locker room wanted to just double down on what it is that Stefanski did well in 2023, in 2020. Again, going into this season, it felt like Kevin Stefanski was the safest person. Andrew Berry, on the other hand, had his fate kind of tied to the success of the 2025 draft class, which we did not know at that point. But we do now know that the 25 draft class is successful, a very successful draft class, right? And it kind of tipped the scales in favor of Andrew Berry because the last thing people were asking about Andrew was how will he draft when he has premium assets? He knocks those premium assets out the park in the 2025 draft. You feel really, really good about Andrew Berry. But with Kevin, there wasn't even that debate, right? Everything was being built around Kevin in the offseason. Everything was being marketed around Kevin in the offseason. Everything was saying that Kevin is safe. Didn't get to the season, and what had felt like a good training camp, what had felt like a productive training camp, then kind of dissipates. And what we're left with is the same exact offensive pig style that the Browns were dealing with at the beginning of the 2024 season. And rapidly, the more and more that nightmare of an offense continues, the more and more the calls become more pertinent for Kevin to be fired, right? It becomes more deafening, the cause for him to be fired. And they're coming from different people who haven't necessarily always called for Kevin to be fired. And then we are where we are today, where Kevin, it's week 18, well, about to be week 18. Kevin has not been fired. And people are unsure whether Kevin's going to walk out this season and get another opportunity to head coach the Browns, or if Kevin's going to be fired at the end of the season. There are some signals that suggest that he will get fired, right? The leaking of the report about Andrew Berry being involved in his successor, which seems like would only leak if Kevin would be on his way out. But on the other hand, you got Joe Bitonio standing up into the media with his chest out and vehemently, earnestly, in a way that I've never seen a Cleveland Browns player do in my lifetime, defending his head coach, right? Like, and this isn't just to anybody in the organization. This is one of the most respected long-term veteran voices, long-term names of this organization, somebody whose name will be on the rim around the new stadium, Joe Bitonio. Like, this isn't just a guy who's been here, came in with Kevin, and probably going to leave with Kevin, right? This isn't some mercenary that Kevin hired to defend him. This is the organization's most tenured player standing up and fighting for Kevin Stefanski in the media, verbally, on his own, without being prompted, which demonstrates that he certainly hasn't lost the locker room, because, again, Joe Bitonio is a huge part of the locker room leadership, right? If you don't have Joe, you don't have the locker room, and he clearly has Joe. So it became obvious to some folks who maybe thought it wasn't the case, that maybe Kevin had lost the locker room, that he clearly had never even come close to losing the locker room. If somebody like Joe Bitonio, who is as respected in that locker room as anybody, and we're even talking about guys like Myles Garrett, hold Joe Bitonio in high esteem, right? Like, this is a person who was Myles Garrett's veteran. If he's willing to go to bat for Kevin, and not just like tepidly go to bat, I mean, he legitimately went to war for Kevin in the press. Like, he basically said, I don't think he should be fired. He didn't even basically say it. He literally said it. And that, to some people, screams that he's not going to get fired because he hasn't lost the locker room. Here's the tricky thing with Kevin Stefanski. You have to, in every conversation that you have with somebody about Kevin, ask them, why do they want Kevin fired? Because you get a lot of different answers. Some people want him fired because they don't think he's a good leader because he doesn't yell enough. I've always thought that was bullshit. I think Joe Bitonio has proved that was bullshit, right? The idea that Kevin's not an effective leader because he's not in like shorts and a tank top screaming at folks, like that's not realistic. Just like, Kevin Stefanski leads in a different way that I think some people are accustomed to. He leads in a way that I think professionals are accustomed to, but not necessarily people who have main experiences with college, with football through like colleges, or a situation where the head coach has absolute authority, right? The NFL is a lot different. You don't have absolute authority in the NFL, so you can't operate like a high school coach or a college coach in the NFL. You kind of got to operate more like a businessman, like a manager, right? Like a chief operating officer, in the NFL. And Kevin operates well as a leader of that kind of structure. Clearly he does. I mean, it's week 17 and the team's still fighting for him. So if you wanted to fire Kevin because you didn't think he could lead a team, maybe you do go back and forth with this kind of a win. My issue with Kevin has never been that I think he's a poor leader. I have, even in videos where I'm arguing for him to be fired, defended his ability as a leader. I think Kevin is a much better leader than the internet gives him credit for. I think Kevin has a tremendous track record of teams in situations where they usually would give up on somebody, not giving up on somebody. I think Kevin has a good track record in the leadership department. If you're looking for a leader of men, Kevin Stefanski has proven to be a leader of men. He's not a leader of men in the rah-rah, yell at you, try to fire you up type way, but he certainly is an effective leader of men. And I don't think he gets to the playoffs in 2023 if he's not a leader of men, right? So yeah, the whole leadership angle about Kevin, I've always thought was silly. I've never advocated for Kevin to be fired because I think he's a poor leader. I've always advocated that if you fire Kevin, that's going to be one of the difficult things you're going to have with replacing Kevin. But my argument to fire Kevin's always been a little bit different. It's not been about leadership. I always thought Kevin was a good leader. I do question whether Kevin's a good architect, right? And that's interesting, right? Because Kevin was brought in mainly because people thought he was a better architect than like a traditional leader. Now he actually gets the job. He does the job for 5 years, and it actually turns out to be the other way around. Kevin, probably a much better leader, leans on those leadership skills to be able to get the results that he can get. But he's not the architect that we thought Kevin was, right? He's not the offensive genius that we were hoping that Kevin would be in 2020. And that's the problem that kind of creates itself with Kevin. We'll talk about that more in just a second, but I gotta thank my sponsor, Sleeper. Real quick, just wanna let you guys know Sleeper has a new offer here. They're offering a free $20 entry, no deposit required. And also, if you're a first-time user, you also will receive a 100% match on up to $100 when you use the promo code Worst Take. Again, $20 free, no deposit required. Plus, first-time users also receive 100% deposit match up to $100. Join Sleeper. It's kind of funny how things go, right? Because it was real easy to give Kevin the title of offensive genius when he walks in here in 2020 and turns a underperforming offense in 2020 and underperforming offensive line in 2020 into one of the better performing, more efficient units in all of the NFL. You know, you get some of the better years out of Baker Mayfield, the more efficient years out of Baker Mayfield, or at least in 2020, one of the more efficient Baker Mayfield years. You get some really effective years from guys like Donovan Peoples-Jones, really effective years from their offensive line. A resurgence from Kareem Hunt, same thing with Nick Chubb, not necessarily a resurgence, but an emergence from that guy. And it was easy to believe that, hey, Kevin's a genius, right? He's doing what everybody else is doing. He's doing it at a high level. 2021 comes around, and it feels like that confirms it, because while the Browns weren't as good as you wanted them to be, given what they were dealing with offensively, they still put together a pretty strong offensive output. And hell, even the Jacoby Brissett year felt like confirmation of it, because the Browns put together a good offense with Jacoby Brissett. I think that's the last year where you felt like Kevin was elevating the offense with what he was bringing to the table with his mind. After 2022, you start to ask questions about if Kevin's actually elevating the offense. They had a decent offense in 2023. There were some moments there from Kevin, but also there were a lot of times where the offense felt like unreasonably stale, right? There was the weird period where him and Deshaun were trying to figure each other out. And then you had the attempt with Dorian Thompson-Robinson to take the reins after the Deshaun Watson injury. And then at the end of the year, they kind of luck into the twilight years of Joe Flacco. But the success they had with Joe Flacco wasn't because they were innovating or anything on offense. It was actually because the opposite, because they weren't innovating on offense and kind of just relying on old school principles that Joe Flacco was just very familiar with, because Joe Flacco was very old. And then after that year, there's a stark decline of what Kevin's able to get out the offense. He starts to turn the book over to other people, and you start to see less and less innovation from the Cleveland Browns. What you do see from Kevin is like, hey, look, they're developing a couple of players, and like he certainly isn't having the team give up on him. But it starts to be this balance of like a guy that you thought could lead, right? After 2020, all that chaos, and a guy you thought was a good offensive mind. You thought you were here but then the offensive mind stuff kind of dipped here, and now you're out of balance here with Kevin. And I think that's the problem, right? The lack of creativity we've seen in the run game over the last 3 years has been a huge issue. They can scream that it's exclusively about personnel all they want, but I just don't believe that's the case. I mean, even when Nick Chubb was here, even when Bill Callahan was the offensive line coach, even when the offensive line wasn't old and decrepit, they were having issues creating run-to-run consistency in the run game. The passing game stuff has been frustrating, right? They've been trying to evolve the offense since 2022 when they acquired Deshaun Watson, and that process has just continued to fall flat. Now, whether it's because of Deshaun Watson, whether it's because of Kevin Stefanski, it still remains that they've tried to evolve the offense, and they've gotten nothing that they can really use out of those attempts. And that's the issue, right? My issue isn't with Kevin Stefanski, the leader. I think that's going to be legitimately difficult to replace, right? Somebody who has wavered to chaos, somebody who does not go with the wind as far as his emotions are, somebody whose emotional stability is leaned upon on this group and relied upon on this group and kind of appreciated. Like, that's not going to be the easiest thing in the world to find. Like, Kevin Stefanski could be calm in the Titanic in the middle of a tsunami, right? Like, he is that calm, that poised of a guy. And as much as that annoys people because it feels like, oh, he's not the most emotional guy in the world, it's also something that helps him lead, and I think has demonstrated himself to be a good leader. And it's why somebody like Joe Bitonio goes out for bat for Kevin when he absolutely doesn't have to, right? Like, Joe's retiring next year. He could give a fuck less who coaches this team if he truly like didn't care about the program or anything. But Kevin's got him to a place where he cares enough about the program to where he cares about this, even though this is largely not going to affect him. Like, this is just going to affect the guys in that locker room and the future of that locker room. So again, Kevin as a leader, I'll defend Kevin as a leader. I think people are too rough on Kevin as a leader when there's too much evidence that these guys in the locker room believe in him as a leader. Kevin as an offensive mind, though, I think that's what's going to get him fired if he gets fired. And I think that's the hard pill to swallow, right? He's not going to be easy to let go. It's not going to be seen as an automatic win. And yeah, the factor of you could do worse than Kevin will definitely play a role in if the Browns make this decision or not. I think it's interesting that we're not really hearing that Kevin's going to be fired, and we're also not hearing that Kevin is safe. And I think that's because the Browns are truly trying to make this decision right now as we speak. I don't know if they know what they're going to do at the end of the season. I don't think they want to fire Kevin. But if they don't believe that Kevin could advance the offense, what other choice do you have? Because as much as you can try to say, hey, we could reduce Kevin's role to the point where he has nothing to do with offense and he could just sit there and lead the team, like, how much of his ability to lead has to do with the fact that he also does have his fingerprints over the offense? You know what I mean? Like, if you remove him entirely from the offense and he's not doing anything, does his ability to lead get weaker because they just kind of see him as a figurehead that has no authority? So, like, can you have the best of both worlds if you want to do it that way? Or are you just going to kind of mess up the balance that's creating him, his ability to kind of hold things together in the way that he has held things together? I don't know if you can have your cake and eat it too with Kevin here. Like, I think you either have to go in on him as an offensive mind or not. And I don't think I've seen enough to make me confident to think that he can fix these problems on the offensive side of the ball. And I think that these problems are severe enough to where you can't do nothing, right? You got to do something, and it can't just be we're going to get better players. That's my standing on it. So I think the Browns should make the tough decision to let Kevin go. And it's not going to be popular, and it is something you can fuck up, and you can certainly hire a worse coach than Kevin, and there is a chance that this backfires, and you hire somebody much worse than Kevin, you set yourself back. But if Kevin can't figure it out offensively, you got to ask yourself, well, how far were you ever going to be able to go? That's my thoughts. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.